Hello, viewers, if you're there.
All
If
right.
not, hello to you when you show up.
Okay. Give it a while. It's
And
usually like that here. All right.
yeah,
All
on
right.
this one, we're going to cover some of the pioneers of 50s rock.
Yep, that's right.
Uh,
And we got a list of them to go along here. This is, of course, Music Memories, Episode 7. We're still around the 1950s music rock and roll period there. And we already covered Elvis. We already covered the acts prior to in the early 1950s, the swing era and all that stuff there. This time we're going to the when the rock and roll scene was really bumping, when the scene
and
was
we're going to
really
hit some, and we're going to hit some of the bigger, more well-known, I guess, the pioneers you might call them.
yeah, exactly. And also I want to touch up on the one and only Alan Freed. We need to talk
Oh yeah,
about how what happened with him because I remember hearing stories from my dad and a couple others that this guy really got screwed. He died penniless and everything. We need to go deep into that, man, because this guy was considered one of the guys who started playing rock and roll on his radio show.
absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess the executives and everybody else of the station and elsewhere that was not approving of that. I guess he was also responsible for booking a couple shows, like Jerry Lee Lewis, the Everly Brothers, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, others. And I guess also he was, I guess we got a deep digger into that. I already have the Wikipedia pulled up right now, so we could take a look at what happened to him and how he got fucked over the way he did. And it's just, it's sad that he apparently died, as I mentioned, died penniless, died broke as hell, and just was
Yeah,
not right.
no, and
No, and also, let's see if we got here. Also, let's not forget the movie American Hot Wax, which the subject of that movie was this particular concert of Bill and all these acts, and the main one they were trying to get as a headliner was Jerry Lee Lewis.
right.
And of course, Lewis himself made an appearance in that movie, doing his lip syncing set there. That's how it was done back then in movies. So let's get jump into it, shall we?
Okay, well, the first one I got on my list is the Everly Brothers.
Yep, Phil and Don.
They had quite
The
quite a
Phil,
few hits.
yes.
Uh,
Wake Up Little Susie,
I got a list. Yeah, well, I got a list here.
which Simon and
I kind of
Garfunkel,
wrote some of this out for change.
yeah, which by the way, they also did one of the original. They did the original "Love Hurts," which would later be covered by Nazareth, Cher, Jim Capaldi, and a few others. Roy Orbison, I guess, he even did his version there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
and we know this song, like one of the most recognized, rock and roll ballad of all time. And of course, Phil and Don, of course, of course, you remember Erin Everly. I guess it was Phil or Don's daughter. She was briefly married to Axl Rose of Guns N' Roses for a few years there during the when the heyday of Guns N' Roses there, and until Axl decided to dissolve that marriage there. And I got a little differently the story to detail later on as we get to later on while we're on the subject of the Everly Brothers of what their former drummer Steven Adler, the ex Guns N' Roses drummer, almost killed her. Believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. If you want me to, I'll let you. I was going to let you dig in into the Everly Brothers there, unless you want me to tell this story now.
Go ahead and then I'll follow up.
Yeah, but what the deal was is that Erin Everly, as you know, was married to Axl Rose, the frontman and lyricist for Guns N' Roses. And apparently, they were married for a couple of years there until Axl decided to, I guess, what they call annul the marriage for a couple of reasons. I guess one of the issues was Axl wanted to have a child, and Aaron Everly was like, "No, I don't think so. It's a little too soon yet." blah blah blah. And Axel being the persistent, stubborn fool that he was. Apparently, what it was, I guess he got some sort of a massive squabble or some sort of fight or whichever there. And I guess as a way of getting back at him, Aaron Everly decided to sleep with Steven Adler, GNR's drummer at that time. Now, they did that, and immediately afterwards, according to legend, he apparently shot her up with a drug now known as the speedball, which is a mixture of heroin and cocaine. You may remember that's the same particular drug that took out John Belushi back in 1982. Axel found out about this. First, he was forgiving at first, but then again, he decided to fire Adler for what he did. I mean, come on, Adler, you almost killed his wife there. Come on, that's unforgivable. That's the same as sleeping with your bandmate's fiance, which happened in the band Poison a few years later on. I mean, come on.
Well,
Man.
of course, you got Fleetwood Mac, and they were all playing around with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true as well, and also with the members of Heart just as well. Is your voice coming through, Arky? Your voice sounds a little bit distorted for some reason there. I just noticed.
Oh, maybe it's just me.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's a connection or something like.
All my settings seem to be good.
All right, and there's no thing saying we have a poor connection, so it must be the mic or something like there. We don't know. But at least we're able to hear each one another. That's the important thing there. So,
Right.
and now
And
we
it just
haven't,
might be me.
yeah, we haven't heard or seen Erin Everly since she was let go from Axl Rose. But who knows? She's probably living a better life because a couple years later, around '93, she detailed how physically abusive Axl was to her.
Which that actually doesn't surprise me, but
Yeah, of course, but of course, then you got to remember, Axel himself came from an abusive household. So when you come from an
right.
environment like that, you're going to repeat the same thing because that's what you grow up learning. Whether it's learning foul language or certain words you're not supposed to say, you know, such and such and such. You learn from what you see. Now, I guess Axel, for I understand, has gotten some therapy for also the sexual abuse he got as a kid as well. So I guess he may be better and all well now, because which probably explains why he was late to all those GNR shows back during the Use Your Illusion or Get in the Ring Motherfucker tours around that period afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
But
hope Aaron is okay. I guess one of them died. I guess of the Everly Brothers. Was it Phil or was it Don or I guess.
I'd have to look that up. I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'll do that as well
in,
right now.
okay. Well, I'll go ahead and go through my string of songs by them.
Okay.
First one I have here is All I Have to Do Is Dream, which
Yes.
covered that one in my group too.
Mm-hmm.
And Bird Dog, Problems. They did Devoted to You, which later I think James Taylor and Carly Simon did.
Yes.
Till I Kissed You.
Mm-hmm.
And they were the first one to do Love Is Strange, which was covered by a lot of people.
Kathy's
Then
Clown, that
you
song there.
mentioned Wake Up Little.
So, Wake Up Little
Yeah,
Susie, as
Bye
I
Bye
mentioned.
Love,
Yep. Love Hurts. And
Let It Be
also,
Me.
yes, and Kathy's Clown.
Yeah, When Will I Be Loved?
Yep.
And Walk Right Back,
Yep.
which was covered by quite a few people too.
Yep.
And that's all I have on my list, but I'm sure I missed a few.
Yeah. And let's not forget the Everly Brothers got back together back, I guess it was in 1986, I understand. They signed with Mercury Polygram Records. I guess their record was, let's see, I guess, let me look at it. 1986.
Yes, I think so.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny because they both broke up because they thought they could do better without the other one, and neither one of them did anything.
Yeah. I guess what it was is that, from we understand, from I'm just reading apparently Phil Everly came on stage. He was drunk off his ass. He was slurring his words, mangling the words to Kathy's clown. They started arguing on stage, in which Phil just simply threw down his guitar, saying, "I'm through being an Everly brother," and that was about it. I guess later on they decided to patch things up, get back together, and make an album titled, I guess, let's see there. What's the name of that album? They get a star in 1986. I'm looking for the name of that comeback album they did. I guess it was produced by either Tom Petty or
I'm
no
not
Tom
even sure what. Yeah.
no comeback in the 80s there. I'm looking up. Yes, comeback. Yeah, they reunited in since 1983. It was 1983. It was
Okay.
they first reunited. The album was it was their first show together after 10 years of not speaking with one another, and it was also featured, a guitar player named Albert Lee who worked it with Eric Clapton's album Money and Cigarettes back in 1982. I guess they had comeback album. I'm looking for the name of that comeback album. Forgot it. I remember the song was named "On the Wings of a Nightingale." That was heavily played on soft rock stations and on the old VH1 channel there. I cannot remember the name, but I think it was Dave Edmunds, who was a solo artist and a member of the Project Rockpile. A couple years
Right.
earlier, I think he produced that album. And God knows, I'm still looking there. And of course, Phil died at the age of 74 back in I forgot what year it was. I think it was in 2005, if I'm correct there.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, and it was
And
a
if
long.
Don's still alive, that's kind of surprising.
Yeah, it was. I know he was like more. Is I mean, I know he's in deep, still in sorrow because remember that was his songwriting partner. That was his brother. He was family. And
Right.
sadly, Phil Everly, as we know, died. It was a long battle with what it was lung disease, basically. You
Mm,
know, I know. You know, apparently the friendship between both Everlys that Albert Lee had with him helped bridge the difficult divide to make the 1983 reunion show happen. Once the duel was up and running again, he didn't. He says he didn't spend much time on internal military role. I guess it was called. They. I guess.
an intermediary.
Yeah, mediarity. Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
thank you. Yes. So,
Hmm,
as we know, the Everly Brothers were one of the good pioneers there. They sing out some damn good songs, and they definitely deserve a huge acknowledgement on this program. Fats
right.
Dynamo, he's another one. He sang "I Found Mine," which we all know. Richie Cunningham would sing a couple of times whenever he got himself a hot date hooked up later on that night on the show Happy Days. And of course, we got to.
Yeah.
Yes, we also
Next guy.
go ahead.
No, you do. You're fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, actually, we got to bring up the shows and particular TV show and a couple movies that came out in the 1970s that was directed towards the 1950s. That being Happy Days, American Graffiti, directed by George Lucas and starring Harrison Ford and Suzanne Summers as the girl in the T-Bird.
Right.
That apparently Harrison Ford's character was so infatuated with. It also starred Howard as well, who of course later became Richie Cunningham, I guess, later
Yeah,
on.
because I think that Happy Days was kind of loosely based on American Graffiti.
Yeah, it was. And when Happy Days first started, it was not filmed in front of a studio audience, as what came later on. So the show,
Right.
and of course, it's like one of those comedic, things like the Leave It to Beaver series, little storyline here, a little bit of laughs here, and that's when they decided to make it to a regular sitcom filmed in front of a studio audience, that's when the show really took off, along with the help of course, Henry Winkler, aka Arthur Fonzarelli, Fonzie, as we all know. The guy was like everywhere on posters, TV, interviews, you name it, kids magazines, teen magazines, you name it. The,
Yeah.
yeah, and that helped along with Scott Bale, Aaron Moran, the talents, of course, Ron Howard, Donnie Most, and Tom Bosley, who played it, Howard Cunningham. I guess, was his name Howard Cunningham? But he was Mr.
Yes.
Cunningham, yes. Marion Ross, who played it, Mrs. Cunningham. All those characters still, to this very day, those were considered happy days because there were no world issues, no political problems. It was no everybody men were men, women were women, and the music that was at that time was like it was new, it was fresh. Everybody got going again. Everybody was happy. Those indeed were happy days. I guess you could see.
Yeah. Yeah. Next guy I got on my list is Rick Nelson, Ricky Nelson, however you want to call him.
Ricky Nelson,
Uh,
yes. Was it Fathers Knows Best was the name of the sitcom he appeared on?
was it that one or Ozzie and Harriet?
I think yes, Ozzie and Harriet. Thank you very much, Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. He was the one that was where he got his start, folks. Now Ricky
Yep.
Nelson would have a few hit singles of his own, including one in the 1970s called "Garden Party." Of course, he would later be the father of Gunnar and Matthew Nelson, the Nelson twins, who later became just simply Nelson. You remember that song, that album "After the Rain" from 1990?
Right.
Yes, and of course Tracy Nelson, who was an actress who appeared on the TV show Square Pegs back in the early '80s during the Valley Girl period around that time when Frank Zappa's Valley Girl was a humongous hit on the radio and everywhere else. And you believe it or not, which by the way also starred Sarah Jessica Parker on that program, by the way.
Right.
And believe it or not, I used to watch that show just for Tracy Nelson. I had a massive ass crush on that girl, believe it or not. She still looks good today, by the way, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, among the Nelson songs were "Fools Rush In," "It's Up to You,"
Hmm.
"Traveling Man," which was big,
Yeah.
"Hello, Mary Lou," "Goodbye Heart."
Was this the same traveling man that Bob Seger would later do for his album Live Bullet?
No, different.
Okay, because that's the first thing came to my mind was that record.
The other one is "I'm a Traveling Man," made a lot of stops all over the world, and the Seeger one's a different song entirely. But it is kind of weird. Same concept though.
Hmm.
You mentioned "Garden Party,"
Yes.
then "Poor Little Fool,"
Yes.
"It's Late," "I'm Walking," "Yes Indeed I'm Talking,"
Oh yeah. We know
and
that song like the back of our hands, most definitely.
"Dream Lover."
Wow.
Those are the ones that I got, but I'm sure there were more that I missed.
Yeah, maybe so, yeah. Of course, Buddy Holly and the Crickets, we know those songs. We were discussing them not too long ago. A native of, guess, Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, in fact, I
Yes.
think he's buried there.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
His hometown of Texas.
technically he's buried there, but
Yeah,
you
got
know,
to get. Since I live in Texas, I've been living in Texas since 2014. I should definitely give a huge acknowledgement to the musicians from the Texas area, including Pantera, Buddy Holly, ZZ Top. I hope I hope someday to run into ZZ Top because I was a big fan of Eliminator, their album Deguendo, a couple other
yeah.
songs they did. Definitely
And Blood Rock was
Blood Rock.
from Fort Worth, I believe.
Oh yeah, Blood Rock, and also I went. Oh yeah, got to mention this guy, James Rivera. I think I mentioned this man before. the front man of the group, the metal band Hellstar. They've been together since 1980s.
Right.
Yeah, I remember running to him at the concert pub on up near the Houston area there. 'Cause that was last year. It was a thing called a tribute to the Scorpions that he was doing there.
Oh wow.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Well, some of the Buddy Holly songs I've got written down are, and a lot of them were covered.
Yes,
Is "Raining in My Heart," which I think was among one of the last ones he did.
yes,
"It's So Easy," which was a Ronstadt cover.
yes, yes. We know we gotta give it up to Ronstadt. I guess, there's a documentary coming out on her. I guess.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Yep. Yeah.
Then he did "Well, All Right," "It Doesn't Matter Anymore," "Peggy Sue." Peggy Sue got married.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
"Love's Made a Fool of You." "True Love Ways." That was covered by Peter and Gordon.
Yep.
"That'll Be the Day," covered by lots of people.
Yep.
"Oh Boy." "Not Fade Away," which the Stones covered.
Yes.
Uh,
It's also we gotta mention a lot of the artists that we are talking about helped played a big part in the British invasion in the following decade there, the 1960s.
yep,
Yeah, including the Stones, the Beatles, the Yardbirds, the Kings, a few others as well.
right. Then he did "Maybe Baby." Uh, "I'm Gonna Love You Too," "Every Day," and another one that the Beatles covered, "Words of Love."
Yeah,
Those were main, a lot of Buddy Holly songs, but
yeah,
as coming from memory, I know I probably forgot some.
yes. Of course,
Then
go ahead.
I was gonna say then we can move on to Roy Orbison.
Oh yeah, I think we know
But
we
if you had
mentioned.
another,
We,
but you
we,
had another point about Buddy Holly, let's get it.
yeah, another point. Of course, we all know Buddy Holly was no longer with us, so thanks to that plane crash in February of 1959, along that took
Right.
his life, as well as Richie Valens, one of the first pioneer Latin rock and roll artists out there, years before Carlos Santana, War, and a few
And the Big
others.
Bopper.
Yes, Big Bopper, J.P. Richardson. And he was the one who coined the phrase, "Hello, baby." Chastity Lane, one of his big hits there.
And was it that flight that Waylon Jennings was supposed to be on
Yeah, the
and
story.
missed it?
Yes, what it was is that they decided to take the plane, all three. Waylon Jennings, decided to take a motor vehicle all the way to the next gig, and I guess what it was is that they jokingly said, "I hope your bus crashes." Oh yeah, and Jennings would reply, "Yeah, I will hope your plane crashes." Ha ha ha. And of course, eventually the plane did crash, and it took how many years for Jennings to get over saying that little joke there because nobody expected that to happen.
And obviously not him either. He wouldn't have said it.
Yeah, it was never meant. It was a so simple little joke that sadly turned into an actual tragic event. And I guess you know it's like the same thing. If you're feuding with somebody and you say, "Oh, I hope somebody shoots your ass," and they find out that later on they get shot in real life, you're gonna definitely hold that against you for a long time there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
the guilt will just overcome you, and then, like I stated, it took Waylon Jennings how many years to get over saying that remark there, which was meant to be a joke, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next next artist I have is Roy Orbison.
Yep.
We kind of talked about him, but there's a few more songs that he did that we missed.
Yeah.
Uh, we mentioned "Crying and Only the Lonely."
Yep.
He did "Leia," "In Dreams."
Not the Derek and the Donmos Leia. I should keep in mind that these
No,
are
it's
two.
Leia, not Layla.
Leia. Okay.
It's Leah.
Okay.
And it's not the same one as
Derek and
Donnie
the
Iris.
Donnie Iris. Yeah, yeah. So I remember
And
him.
you got Dream Baby, Candyman. I wish I could read my writing.
Oh,
His version of Love Hurts, Blue Bayou, Mean Woman Blues, and of course Oh Pretty Woman, which was easily his biggest. And You Got It.
yeah. It
And
was.
I'm sure I missed a few.
Oh yeah. Yeah. By the way, You Got It came out on his. He had a comeback album called Mystery Girl, which came out actually came out year before prior. It actually came out after his passing. Believe it or not, the album was
Yeah,
produced by Jeff Lynne from ELO, big Orbison fan, and of course we cannot forget the his involvement with the Traveling Wilburys, along with him. It was Orbison, Lynn, Tom Petty, George Harrison, and Bob Dylan.
right.
And of course, after Orbison's death, they decided to carry on, make another record. I don't know if they did any shows as the Traveling Wilburys, but um, you think they ever did? You know, because I know no, it was just a studio project only, for what I remember hearing there.
I think it started that way and pretty much stayed that way. Of course, Harrison died not long
2000,
after that.
yeah, a lot of years after that. He died in 2001. Tom Petty passed away in 2017. Um, and I guess it would leaves a
Well,
Dylan.
surprisingly, Dylan's still with us.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, very sad. And it
Well,
was
it's
kind of
not sad that he's with us, but
yeah, I know. And here's something else. Del Shannon, who you remember the song "Runaway," he was
and
they
Keep
were
Searching.
yes,
Hats off to Larry.
hmm "Teenager in Love." Remember that song?
Well, actually, that was Dion.
Oh my gosh, my bad. Remember, I'm. This is why I got the Arknolia as my co-host to remind me of who did who originally there, because you know,
I was around then.
yeah, I know. I was around. I wasn't around until I was born until 1966. So some of the memories of some of the 50s music has escaped me because of all the things that are going on at this moment and things that went on here. You got to remember that. So if I'm a little bit dense, folks, here, you understand why. But
And of
Del,
course, my memory will fail me just because it's one of the things that happens when you get older.
yeah, and as I was going to say, Del Shannon was some. Apparently, he was considered to take Roy Orbison's spot in the Traveling Wilburys. Of course, we don't know what kind of name he would have given. They had nicknames like gimmick names like Otis Wilbury, John Wilbury, that kind of thing. There, the same thing that the Ramones had going on there.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
Next guy I got on my list is Chuck Berry.
Oh yeah, the father of rock and roll. We all know his songs like the like Maybelline, Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven, and all the great
Carol.
Carol. Of course, School Days, Almost Grown. I mentioned that one record that my dad had in his collection called Twist, and it was a
Right,
compilation of all his good songs there. And of course, I mentioned one of my favorites, Maybelline, which kind of like deals
right.
with the oh yeah, we can't forget that one song, Come Home, I think it was. I think if I remember, because
Come home.
Come Home, I kind of trying to remember that. I remember hearing that. I remember seeing a clips of that song being performed in the documentary Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, and that came out in
Hmm.
1987. And I guess the story was that I guess Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones was a big fan, and I guess he wanted to. Keith wanted to say hi to Chuck Berry for some reason backstage at a show. I guess it was Berry and the Rolling Stones together, for what I understand. And I guess for some reason, Chuck Berry beat the living crap out of Keith Richards, gave him a black eye and everything.
Huh. That's kind of strange.
Yeah, I remember
Hadn't
reading
heard
it.
that story.
Yes, I remember. Yes, he I guess what it was is that according to Keith, he had Barry had this chip on his shoulder, and I guess Keith, almost knocked it off. And I remember he
Wow.
was also talking about it in a magazine interview back in 1981. And I guess he later on saw Chuck Berry later on and left a note in his guitar case saying, "Thanks for the black eye, Keith."
Wow. And he also did Back in the USA.
Yep, which Ronstadt
Uh,
covered as well on her album with the
right.
same name. That record, by the
Rock
way,
and roll
was,
music,
yep,
which the Beatles and the Beach Boys covered.
yeah, absolutely.
No Particular Place to Go, which
I
that was one
remember
of my
that.
favorites.
Yep.
Nadine,
Hmm.
which was covered by a group that you may or may not have heard of, Southwest FOB.
Mm.
They were semi-known, but not. They were more of a Texas group too.
Yep.
Then I got Sweet Little 16, which when we talked about that one before, we mentioned that the Beach Boys song "Kurt Surfing USA" pretty much took it note for note with different words.
Yep.
And then we had Reeling and Rocking.
Yep. Oh yeah, which you mentioned George Thorogood and the Destroyers did an awesome live version of. I remember hearing that on the radio a few times. He was a big
and
player in his career there. Chuck Berry was.
and and the Dave Clark Five covered that song.
Yep, absolutely.
Now I think you mentioned Memphis. Then we got Around and Around, which the Stones covered,
Yep.
and one of the ones that later in his career in the live Londonderry session songs was
Hmm.
one little ditty he called "My Ding-a-Ling," which I
Wow. Yeah.
guess you can figure out what that was about.
Yes, I remember. Yes.
We may get into that again when we cover novelty tunes, because
Yes.
that was definitely a novelty tune. But yeah, that was a fun little song.
Oh man.
Yeah,
It
and
was.
Hunter Dvorak made a point in the chat, which he's right.
Hmm.
Without Chuck Berry or Little Richard,
There would
there
be no
wouldn't really
rock and
be.
roll.
Yeah,
Ro- Yes, and we
and he's
also
right.
yes, we also give credit to Bo Diddley, who we also just mentioned in the chat as well. Bo Diddley was a big player in the rock and roll scene there.
John Lee
Um,
Hooker.
John Lee Hooker, yes, absolutely. If we can name all the all the blues musicians out there that influenced the British music scene there, it would be endless. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
yeah,
In fact, a lot of them were never well known, except that the British musicians, for
yeah,
the most part,
yeah,
kind of brought them forward.
yeah. And it was just, I remember seeing this cartoon in a magazine that I used to read back in Michigan called Cream, CREEM, that was based out
Right, I
of
remember
Michigan.
that one.
Yes. And it pretty much had a little article about it, and they had a little cartoons saying boys in a record store, British boys. They were saying, that, "Oh, John Lee Hooker, I love him. Ray Charles, yes, I love him. How about I'll be over by the Chuck Berry records over there." And a few years later, the same boys are playing in a band and they're singing something that's very familiar, which is actually Chuck Berry tunes there. That pretty much sums up how massively big the R&B scene and the blues was, how massively huge the scene was over in England, how much they influenced the young lads over there to pick up guitars and start playing tunes. One of them, of course, was Jimmy Page.
Yeah, and Hunter Dvorak just mentioned Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and that's
Yes,
another couple of them that were
absolutely. I remember there was a live album that the Rolling Stones did called "Love You Live," and they did it was I guess it was a club performance that they recorded. I guess the Stones often do club shows before they head off on their world tours. There, I guess it's a
right.
tradition of theirs. And one of the songs they covered was, of course, "Mannish Boy" by I guess Muddy Waters.
Yeah, in fact, if you examine the Stones albums, all through, especially early,
Yeah,
was all kinds of covers
yeah.
of
The early
old
records
old
that
R&B.
the ones that came out on London Records back in the '60s before they decided to create their own record label titled, of course, Rolling Stones Records.
Right.
Hmm.
But
So
yeah, you're right. It's a lot of their early stuff. They covered a lot of things, not just R&B, but
the Beatles
Buddy
as well.
Holly.
The Beatles as well. They did Little Richard. They did Chuck Berry. They did a couple others. I guess the song Kansas City was recorded by somebody else whose name escapes me.
I know it wasn't Wilbert Harrison because that was a different Kansas City,
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
It was
maybe
definitely a
so.
different version.
I'm thinking so. I'm thinking of the song that was. I'm thinking of the version that appeared. Basically, I had a compilation from the Beatles. It was my very first vinyl album. It was a two-record set of simply their rock and roll stuff there. Of course, later on they would put out a compilation of
That,
their love ballads, simply called love songs.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that's one you were just talking about. Sounds like 1962 to 1966.
yeah. No, this was a
That was a
different.
double set they had.
Yeah, but
That
that was the red record. I'm speaking of that. It was a different album. It was simply called The
oh
Beatles Rock and Roll Music. And it was given for my birthday when I was about 11 years old. And at this when I was really starting to get into the Beatles big time, thanks to the cartoon series that
yeah,
syndication TV was playing in the afternoons on the weekends. I was like, holy cow. Not only did I dig the music, the instruments, and the suits that they were wearing at that time, I was way into that, man.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, we'll cover that for sure when we do our Beatles show because
absolutely.
there's a lot of material there.
A lot of details on the Beatles we need to discuss. It'll probably have to be a 2 hour show when you think about
Well,
it.
it's starting to look like it because if you just cover their early career before Sergeant Pepper,
Yeah.
that alone is probably going to take an hour. And then when you hit Sergeant Pepper,
Look out.
uh,
And after and
then you got
hereafter
Sergeant Pepper,
and
Magical Mystery, the
to,
White Album.
yeah, the
You know,
Abbey Road, Let It Be, the issues between them and EMI over the record label that they were supposed to be running.
right?
No, we got to dig deep into that in the future there.
Yeah, that and there'll probably be anybody looking for it. I'm going to say probably a week to 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
But it kind of depends on how deep we go into some of the other stuff we cover before we get to that. Because
Yes.
that's basically part of the British invasion.
Yeah.
And of course, we got to touch the British invasion before we get into them.
Yes.
Either that or figure it out whether we do the Beatles first, then the British invasion, or vice versa.
I think it was the Beatles first, then the British invasion that came afterwards, because afterwards, all these British bands figure if the Beatles can make it in America, so can we.
Yeah, and then we were flooded. I mean, we could spend an hour talking about the
Massively
various.
flooded. The Kings, Herman's Hermits, um, the Rolling
The Who.
Stones, the Who, and so many groups out there that were probably never known, but still deserve acknowledgement.
Oh yeah, there was
Yeah.
some of them that actually never really did anything over here, but we found out about them later.
Yes,
We'll get into a few of those.
that's correct.
Um, and then, see, was there anything else about the 50s we wanted to talk about?
Yeah, Alan Freed. Alan Freed,
Oh,
as we
yeah,
mentioned.
yeah,
Now, we got to discuss this, Louis. I got the Wikipedia on this guy. He was like one of the pioneers of the rock and roll DJs there. Apparently, what it was that in 1958, Freed faced this big controversy in Boston when he told the audience, it quote unquote, it looks like the Boston police don't want you, the kids, to have a good time. And as a result, he was arrested and charged with inciting to riot. He was later fired from his job at the one radio station he was working for, WINS. Now, his career ended, and sadly, when it was revealed that he had accepted payola, which was basically payments from certain record labels to play specific records. The original pay to play type of
Right.
deal there.
Essentially a human jukebox.
Yeah. And it was a practice that at that time was highly controversial. There was also what it was called a conflict of interest, that he was taking songwriting co-credits, notably on the song Maybelline by Chuck Berry, who we mentioned earlier, which entitled him to receive part of a song royalties, which he could help, increase by heavily promoting the record on his own program in another example.
Right.
Also,
Right.
excuse me, also, one of the members of a band called the Moonglows, I guess it's Harvey Fuqua, I think it was. It's spelled Fuqua, I guess it says. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he insisted that Alan Freed's name were not merely just credit on the song called Sincerely, that he actually did co-write, which would still be I guess in the parentheses, which also could still be a conflict of interest for Freed to promote. Now, Freed
Right.
lost his radio show at WABC, and he was fired from the station altogether in November of 1959. He was also fired from his television show, which at the time continued with different hosts. In the 1960, payola was made illegal, and in 2 years after that, he pleaded guilty to two charges of commercial bribery, for which he received both a fine and a suspended sentence. Now, Freed, as you know, died as later in his later years. I need to bring this up here because this is kind of sad here. Because of the negative publicity from the payola scandal, no prestigious radio station would employ him. He later moved to the
Right.
West Coast in 1960, where he worked on the KDAY in Santa Monica, California. 2 years after that, they after the station refused to allow him to promote rock and roll stage shows, he moved to Miami, Florida for this other radio station, but that association lasted only 2 months. During
Wow.
1964, he returned to the Los Angeles area and worked for a station called KNOB, KNOB. Now, he died in Palm Springs, California in January 1965 from urethra and this issue here that was brought on by alcoholism. He was 43 at the time. He was initially referred to the, I guess it was the Ferncliff Cemetery in Hartsdale, New York. His daughter-in-laws carried his ashes to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland, Ohio. And in August of 2014, the Hall of Fame asked his son, Lance Freed, to remove the ashes permanently, in which he eventually did. The Freed family interred his ashes to Cleveland's Lakeview Cemetery beneath a jukebox-shaped memorial bearing
Wow.
Alfred's image.
Well, that's kind of a shame that basically the guy that championed and really pushed rock and roll would have that kind of a legacy.
Yeah, I know, yeah. And of course, at that time, before it was made illegal, I guess, payolas was one of the things going on at that time. We pay you to play this record. We pay you to play that record. We pay you this. But at that time, that was one of the main things they had to do to get the artists' songs played.
Yeah, because most people weren't playing them other than Alan Freed.
Exactly, yes. So, but that back then, it was one of the things they had to do.
Right,
And
right.
which also brings up something else that I remember hearing in a book about Frank Sinatra. You remember that was written by, you remember the author Kitty Kelly?
Yeah,
Remember the book she wrote about, All Blue Eyes, titled His Way? There was a method where all the girls were paid about $5 by this person, that agent, or that person, so they could fall on this, pretend to faint, give, to make the artist look good, to make all Blue Eyes look like a god amongst the ladies there.
Yeah, it was just kind of ironic because, as far as I know, they weren't paying anybody to do that to the Beatles.
Yeah, I
It was
know.
just what they were doing.
Yeah, they did it on their own. They made the girls swoon and cry on their own selves there.
Yeah,
And the same thing with teen idol David Cassidy.
yeah, yeah.
Apparently,
Or
what,
as I
what
call him, Leafy Carrot.
yeah, Leafy Garrett. Well, actually, David Cassidy was way before Leif Garrett, believe it
Right.
or not. Apparently, what the story was that in Detroit, Michigan, at a performance, I guess it was the Cobo Hall or Cobo Center or Arena, 150 girls passed out.
Wow. Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
And he didn't take, and those girls didn't accept any payment as well. Cassidy did it on his own with just his good looks and his good nature there.
Yeah, because he wasn't the world's greatest singer. I mean, he wasn't bad, but
Yeah, but damn, the guy considered all these girls at the time, he was like a heartthrob to them.
yeah, yeah.
Now, all right
But I
there.
guess we need to point out to people that tomorrow night we're going to discuss Sheena, Queen of the Jungle. Will start at 5 o'clock.
That's
No,
correct.
wrong. Six
6
o'clock
o'clock
Central.
Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time there.
And then we'll start next week. Next week.
Yep,
And all our shows generally are going to start at 6 o'clock Central, except for Thursday,
yep,
which
Twitch
will
is
start at
today.
5 o'clock.
Yeah, so in about a few minutes, I'll be joining the Real as Fuck TV crew, which is a Minnesota Vikings fan, Minnesota Silver Roll Hunter, possibly Redneck, and of course yours truly here. And that'll be starting in about a couple minutes there.
Yeah, so I guess we need to sign off, and you'll have to get to that.
Yeah, definitely. And I
And I
got to take a leak, get a drink, or whichever there, and get ready for later on tonight. So we'll definitely head over to both my channel as well as the Real as Fuck TV channel. We're getting ready to simulcast together there. I gotta get some shit ready there. So once again, tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we'll be discussing Sheena, the Queen of the Jungle, a look at the 1984 movie starring Tanya Roberts, as well as the movie, the TV series that was before and afterwards. The two TV series there, from the 50s and I guess the later 1990s or 2000s that started Gina Lee Nolan.
and we'll kind of hit on the comic books too because those are pretty popular.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking for Google images and details there, and yes, definitely. We got to acknowledge that as well. Okay, Arky,
Sound
I'll see you tomorrow night. All right.
okay? Sounds
Okay.
good.
Okay. For Arknolia and myself, once again, this is Arknolia and the Doctor. Episode 7 of Music Memories. We'll look at the 50s. All right. Arky,
Sounds good.
I'll see
We'll
you
see you
tomorrow.
guys later.
All right then. Bye bye there.
Bye.
All right.